So let's start again. So I'm going to just to make a few basic points about what we're doing on this. Now, it is a meditation workshop, so I'm going to be leading into meditation. So do make sure that you're set up in a way where you can comfortably sit and meditate. And one of the things, an important point, is only do what feels right for you. So I'm going to be making various suggestions for ways of looking at your practice, and we're going to go into all 5 principles of the system of practice over these 5 mornings. And these suggestions are, in a way, they're taking you further into your practice. So, this is an event for order members and mitras. So I'm assuming that there is, a good level of regular practice on everybody's part, and that you're all familiar with not just with what the 5 principles of our system of practice are, but also familiar with ways of working with them, in the traditional ways in which they're usually introduced, and in other ways as well, because as you realize, they are very flexible. They're very flexible and open principles in many ways. I'll be going into those individually as we proceed. So what I'm going to be doing is pointing to ways of going more deeply into your practice of these 5 principles. As I say, I'm assuming that you're already, you've been engaging with them in various ways. It's not about going into them in the ways that you already have, but in ways which help you explore them more broadly. So this is what this dynamic mandala is about. It's about exploring these more broadly, but specific to the approach that I'm taking on this retreat is that we're going to go into all 5 principles. We're going to bring them in a way which integrates them, which brings them together. The way in which we're going to do this is that sometimes I'm going to be speaking, sometimes I'm going to be leading you into exercises in which we look at various aspects of our practice, and sometimes I'm going to be asking people to feedback their impressions or any questions. So I'm giving opportunity for that. Please, I might not always remember to mute when I should. So, don't ask questions in the middle of when I'm speaking, just to keep it clear. I think when when everyone's in one room together, it's relatively straightforward. But when we're all kind of online and a bit unused to working in this way, it could become a bit kind of confusing, at least from the point of view of the recording. So the questions, when I give you questions, they're suggesting ways in which to look at your experience. Yeah. So questions aren't looking for a conceptual answer, or they're not looking for a conceptual exploration. They're looking for you to see what I'm pointing to and go into that in your own experience. It could be almost any area of meditation, actually, your own experience with awareness. Bring your awareness to experience, and then I'll ask you to feedback what you've observed. And we'll sort of proceed in that way to clarify what we're actually looking at and what we're discovering. One of the terms that I'm going to probably use quite a lot is soma or somatic. So somatic is familiar from the term psychosomatic. And so soma means the body, but in the way that I'm using it, it means I'm indicating the alive energy of sensate experience. You could say it's the living energy of the body. Is particularly in the body, but we might also be focusing on the other sense spheres. So the first aim of the retreat is to become more deeply embodied. And in a way, that's the aim throughout. So we're going to become embodied in the first area of the system of practice, which is integration. We're going to do some practice which is related to the ones that we familiarly do, which, basically when Sangharakshita talked about integration, he indicated the practices as the mindfulness of breathing and mindfulness. Yeah, so it includes mindfulness practice. So we're going to be going into the body as our way into mindfulness and awareness. And we'll continue in a similar way with positive emotion, spiritual death, spiritual rebirth, and receptivity. The first thing I think that we need to get in place is some clarity about the distinction between mind and body. And this is really, really very basic and very important. It's something which, in a sense, you can't even start meditating effectively without having clarity about this. So mind is basically anything that the mind is doing, and it means the active mind, the thinking mind, the imagining mind, the planning mind, any aspects of mental activity. So when I say mind, I'll normally mean mental activity. Body stands for not just the tactile sense of the body, but also the other five sense fields, the five basic body senses, as they're called: the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. Yeah. So, why is this distinction important? It's because we are so attuned to living in the mind or from the mind that we often mistake mental experience for body experience. Now, I'm just going to take you through a short exercise to get a sense of that. So, just get ready for, maybe 5 minutes of sitting. And we're not going to do any particular setting up here. So just settle into body experience. And notice the breathing. Notice that how the breath is coming in through the nostrils. It moves through the nasal passages, and then it begins to go down into the lungs. The lungs expand, and then at some point they start to release the air back up through the windpipe and out again through the nose. So just follow that process for a few rounds of breathing. Okay, now stop following the breath in that way. And this time, sort of start afresh and look into your experience as to where you actually first experience an in-breath? What's the first location in the body where you first experience an in-breath? Okay, so any observations there? Where do you first experience the in-breath? Anyone?
Nostrils.
Nostrils, okay. Fair enough. Anywhere else?
I think it was my diaphragm.
Okay, you experience it in the diaphragm.
For me, I think it was in perception.
In perception. Where's your perception?
Well, that was it. I don't think it was anywhere, but it was definitely, it wasn't, obviously I could sort of sense the sort of direction of where it was coming in, but it wasn't there. I was noticing it. It was somewhere else. Didn't really have a location.
Okay, that's good. I mean, that certainly is a possibility. You know, obviously it was for you, Sam, but anywhere else actually in terms of the body where you experience the breath?
I felt mine in the chest.
Okay. Okay. Anyone get any sort of radically different places you're experiencing it? Unexpected places?
I found it was kind of wherever my attention was.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Yeah, mine was in my belly and my diaphragm because my attention was there. I took my attention to my nostrils, obviously, because I know cognitively that's where I first experienced it, but it wasn't actually where I was first experiencing it.
Yeah, yeah, good. So now let's just take up Jyoti's point about it being wherever your attention was. So just shut your eyes again and just begin to experience the breathing. And just let your awareness or your point of focus come to different parts of the body where you experience the breathing. You could bring it down to the abdomen, to the chest, to the diaphragm, to the throat, to the nose. Okay, so did anyone notice this time, something along the lines of what Jyoti was saying?
Yeah.
Okay, now you can sort of experiment with any of these in your own practice, but I just want to sort of move things along. So the point here is that you should be able to observe if you go into this with clarity and without any assumptions, that in a way the whole process of the in-breath and the out-breath, it's experienced potentially anywhere where there are sensations related to the breath in the body, and it does depend on where you're bringing your awareness. So it's like you can get a sense of the whole thing. Also sort of focus in and just notice that it's happening in particular places. So the way in which we started was, imagining, really in a way imagining it's coming in through the nose and going down and then coming up again. And what you're noticing here is that in your experience, that's not the case. The breath is not experienced as coming in through the nose, going down and coming up again. That is something that you're adding on mentally. You're just, it's quite easy to think that it's going on in this way, but this is not how it's actually happening. Yeah, so that is one example of the way in which the mind can sort of override your actual experience by bringing certain subtle assumptions into what you're experiencing in the breathing. So any questions around that? Is that fairly clear?
Yeah, I was going to say, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Does that mean we're not meant to try to make it come down our throat, that sort of thing?
No, not in a way, the breathing is just happening, isn't it? So yeah. So you're not this little exercise is not about something that we're supposed to do. It's about noticing how the mind can overlay your body experience. So the mind is making the assumption that it's coming in through the nose and going down and coming out again. Doing those other two ways of looking, that's not actually what's happening. In a way, you could say that it's happening simultaneously in all parts, and it just depends on when, as Jyoti said, it depends on where you're bringing your attention at that particular time. Okay?
When I thought it's sorry. The sound's sort of gone a bit funny.
Yeah, it's Francis J.
Yeah, needs to mute.
There's a strange noise coming from your speaker, Francis. Oh, yeah. Could you just keep muted until you want to say something? Thank you. Okay, did anyone else have any observations around that?
Well, I suppose I've got an observation, like from years of breathing, that air comes in and goes down. It's not spontaneous, it's not there all the time. So it comes in and it goes out. Then it's empty, then it fills. I can't really comprehend it's everywhere all at once.
Well, I'm not talking about the air, actually. I'm talking about your tactile experience.
Well,
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought my tactile experience was caused by the air. You don't think so?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is one of the things that we're trying to get at, because what we're experiencing when we do the mindfulness of breathing is sensations, body sensations. Yeah, and of course, we know that those sensations are caused by the air coming in and going out again. But what we're looking at is our actual experience. Yeah, and in a way, from the point of view of our actual experience, the air is irrelevant. What's relevant is what we're experiencing now. So this is what we're bringing attention to. Just noticing that. I mean, in a way, bringing in air is one way of adding something, from the mind onto our actual experience. So what we're aiming to do here is be very, very open to what our experience actually is. Be very clear that all we have to go on with the breathing is body sensations, and those body sensations, if you just take the sensations themselves, you can notice that the breath seems to start at any point in the body where you happen to have your focus at that time. So, I mean, this is something that you can experiment with. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I just wanted to get some clarity around the distinction between actual experience and mental projection onto that experience. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much, Tejananda.
Okay, pleasure. Okay, so a couple of other sort of more basic things about what we're doing. We're going to be going into the 5 principles, as I said, and this morning, although we've had a bit of a late start, we're going into integration, that will continue throughout the 5 mornings. Yeah, so it's all going to be integrated. What we're going to be doing, in a way, is we're starting with getting into the body, getting into the soma, experiencing that directly, the body and the breath. And then we're going to bring in the heart. Yeah, so we're continuing in a more or less somatic way. You know, we're going into the heart and the heart qualities, which of course brings us into positive emotion, metta, love, and so forth. You know, so we'll be going into that tomorrow. And then we'll go on to spiritual death. Spiritual death in terms of exploring the actual nature of our body experience. You know, so again, in relation to what we were just doing, we mentally project a lot onto our experience without actually realizing it. You know, we don't actually know that we're doing this because it's so much the way in which we're always functioning. You know, so what we're going to do is to look more deeply into the nature of body and sense experience in terms of spiritual death. Spiritual rebirth, I'll say more about that when we come to it, but one way of looking at spiritual rebirth from this point of view is that when a spiritual death happens, a spiritual rebirth occurs. Yeah. So in other words, when you see through an assumption, you know, it could be even be what we've just been doing. You know, the assumption that you do experience the breath coming in and going down in that order. Yeah. So if you see that that's not what's actually happening, you've got a little mini spiritual death because you've seen through an assumption that you have, and that leads to a mini spiritual rebirth, which is, oh, it's not like that, it's like this. Okay, so that mini spiritual rebirth is a little insight. You know, you're seeing something in a different way. A certain assumption has been seen through. So you could say that, well, that principle is embodied in the dynamic between spiritual death and spiritual rebirth. In terms of practice, spiritual rebirth, of course, is largely associated with sadhana. You know, so although we do say that you know, devotional practice, puja, and so on is related to spiritual rebirth because it is related to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and confidence, trust, faith, shraddha. It really, you know, as a practice, is mainly embodied in the sadhana that order members do. And I'll just say for now, I will say a little bit about this on day 4, but what this is about in terms of the way the kind of dynamic mandala is, in terms of sadhana, you're moving from the generation stage to the completion stage. And I won't say anything else about that, but if I forget on, what will it be, Wednesday, you know, somebody maybe can remind me to talk about the distinction of the generation stage and the completion stage, because actually this is a principle that applies to all of us. It doesn't just apply to sadhana, but I won't go into that anymore now. Finally, there's just sitting. Yeah, so just sitting is, if you like, that's what's at the center of the mandala. So I'm using the idea that the first 4 principles are, as it were, the periphery of the mandala, and we're going through them in that order: integration, positive emotion, spiritual death, spiritual rebirth, and then we come into the center with just sitting. Okay. There's something further that I want us to, well, hopefully start to explore in relation to these 5 principles and the way that we practice them, which is that there's a contrived and an uncontrived way of approaching this. Or you could say there's a formed and unformed way. You've got we're familiar with the term bhavana, as in metta bhavana, Bhavana means cultivation or development. Yeah, so integration, positive motion, spiritual death, and spiritual rebirth are all about cultivation. Initially, there's also the term, I'm sure I'm not making this up, but it works anyway. There's bhavana, there's also abhavana. Yeah, so not developing, not cultivating. Now, you'll probably recall if you've, I think Sangharakshita talks about this in his original lecture on the system of meditation. You've got just sitting, usually or often referred to as a practice, but he does also refer to it as a non-practice. So, this is a important distinction between bhavana, abhavana, practice, non-practice, development, non-development, or forming and non-forming. Yeah, all of those represent the same, two possibilities. So I'm going to kind of talk about these in relation to each of these areas in a particular way, or sort of guide us through in a particular way. Starting with integration, we're going to do this as mindfulness of the body primarily. Of course, in principle, it's mindfulness of the four satipatthanas, but we're just going to focus on the body. This leading in, that's, if you like, that's the form aspect or the bhavana aspect. And the abhavana aspect, I'm going to call it somatic awareness. Okay, so we're moving from something we're developing to something that we're simply aware of as there, somatic awareness. That's just my term for it, at the moment, but it could be spoken of in other ways. And then with metta, we've got the metta that we bhavana. Yeah, we've got the metta bhavana. So we're cultivating metta. And I'm going to contrast that with unconditional love. You could almost say unconditioned love. Yeah, but unconditional is a way we often talk about it. So unconditional love. With spiritual depth, we've got reflective insight. In other words, we've got insight practices in which we reflect on something, either using concepts or the imagination and bringing that into our experience. So reflective insight is doing an insight practice. And then there's direct knowing. Yeah, knowing directly. And again, this is not something it's not something outside the possibility of our experience. We've just done it with that exercise with the breathing. If you've seen that the breath can be experienced wherever you have your awareness, that is a direct knowing. Okay, and the Sanskrit term for that is jnana. It's just knowing. Then with the spiritual rebirth, as I've said, we're just going to in principle, move from the generation stage to the completion stage. And finally, with just sitting, which is, as it were, where it all ends up, we're going to move from just sitting conceived as some kind of practice into just sitting as non-practice. Yeah, so again, just taking up Sangharakshita's suggestion there that just sitting is not a practice. Another way of putting it is that with just sitting, all of these 5 areas, when you get into the abhavana aspect, look like just sitting, but it's just sitting, you could say flavored or perfumed with the quality of that particular principle. Yeah, so but it all comes into a just sitting in which there's a relaxing out of doing, a relaxing out of doing into, I would say, or could say, simply being. And just to emphasize that being is not indicating some kind of static state or, some truly existing thing. Being, the word is in the form of a verb, being. So we're discovering essentially that what we've been cultivating is already here. What we've been cultivating is already here. So that's the way in which we're going to work with those 5 principles. In order to do that, we're going to have to keep things really simple. You might be glad to hear. So I've said quite a lot so far, but I'd like us to do some practice, and just to start to become embodied, and then begin to explore the nature of our body experience right now. But before that, any questions? No?
I'm already blissed out.
Good start then.
Tejananda, are you able just to say something about the completion, the idea of completion with spiritual rebirth? I didn't understand what that meant.
Okay, well, I'll just go into the principle now, because I think, as I said, it is relevant to all of our practice. And it's simply this. Let's take the Metabhavana. Yeah. So we do the Metabhavana, the 5 stages. We work with those stages. Initially, we have to work to get some sort of sense of what metta actually is. So when we talk about it, if we're doing an introductory class on metta, we might say things like, well, it's friendliness, it's warmth, it's goodwill, it's kindness. Yeah. That gives you some sort of sense of the area of what metta is about. That, it gives you some sort of sense of it, but you have to work into it, and then we have to get a sense of working. Why do we work with those particular phrases? What are they doing? How do they help us? May you be happy, may you be well, may you be free from suffering. How does that actually relate to an experienced, felt sense, you could say, of what metta is? Okay, so we do the bhavana, and I mean, I must say, from my own point of view, I'm kind of going into what I want to go into tomorrow, but it doesn't matter. From my point of view, it took quite a while to become clear about what metta actually was, in my experience. And at that point, I also realized that I couldn't really talk about it. If you like, it's something, what it is. Just like when you taste a strawberry, you know what a strawberry tastes like. It's a direct experience, but you can't put it into words. So we've got all the work that we do in these 5 areas of principle, all of the practices that we do, and then you've got the actual thing. So in terms of development, it's doing the Metabhavana. In terms of completion, it's metta is here. Does that make it clear what the basic principle is?
Yeah, the last, yeah. I think more. Yeah, yes. Okay,
so that's the general principle, and there's a similar thing going on in relation to sadhana with the visualization practices. You do that practice. There's a certain sort of form to it, and at the end you just sit. You dissolve everything and you just sit. Now, important point is that, again, going back to the talk that Sangharakshita gave in 1978, A System of Meditation, he emphasized that you should always just sit both before and after any bhavana practice. Yeah. So the just sitting before, which we will be doing, is to basically not do anything, but just get a sense of how we are, what's going on in mind and body. But the one afterwards is giving an opportunity for the thing that we've been aiming at, let's say it's metta, it gives an opportunity for metta actually just to be here without us making any effort. Yeah, there's a phenomenon known as the final bell phenomenon, which you might have observed. I've just called it that, by the way. The final bell phenomenon is that when you're doing a practice, say a lead practice, and somebody's ringing bells, you're working hard to get, let's say you're working hard to try and get into some metta, but you haven't got any sense of it. And then the final bell goes and you just relax. And at that moment, metta is there. Has anyone had that kind of experience? Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Those who I can actually see, some have indicated that they can. So it's fundamentally, that's what we're doing with just sitting. We just stop doing any practice whatsoever and don't try and make anything happen. Then what happens spontaneously. Now, of course, if you've been meditating for 40 minutes or something in constant mental proliferation, and the mental proliferation hasn't changed at all, well, you'll probably find that in the just sitting, you'll be still mentally proliferating. But if you've got a bit further than that, and some of the hindrances have kind of died down or even gone away for a period of time, the just sitting can be where the practice really, the fruits of the practice really reveal themselves. So it's a kind of spiritual rebirth thing. So that would be the completion stage. So every practice, in a way, has that completion stage if you do a just sitting at the end. Now, I think it's probably high time for an actual practice, but I'm wondering whether just to have a 5-minute break at this point, in case anyone needs to use the loo or something. So we'll leave it on 10 minutes. Pamadrashti is saying. Okay, well, let's say it's 12:05. Let's make it 7 minutes, okay? So
10 past.
About 12 minutes past. Yeah. So just leave it on.
Tejananda, can I speak?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize the clocks had gone forward.
Okay. Well, now it's 12:10. Yeah.
I just realized.
Okay. Good. Well, it'll be clear tomorrow.
Obviously, the jobs that are never celebrated. Oh, did you speak then?
Okay, so yeah, we'll continue.
Sorry, Tejananda, could you just see if you can mute Jane's iPhone?
Well, I'll just mute all. Hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I causing a problem?
You need to mute your phone if you can, Jane.
Well,
don't worry if it should be that. That's it. It's done.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to mute everybody now. Well, I'm just going to. Now, remember, you can unmute yourself if you want to say something, but otherwise, keep yourself muted. So I think that will also help with the bandwidth, maybe. Okay, so let's do a practice after all that talking. So we're going to start this initial area of integration with simply coming into our direct experience of the soma, the alive, energetic body, the sensate body. But just have your basic posture in place, and for a couple of minutes, just sit. And we're just sitting, we're not trying to get anywhere else other than where we are or what's happening now. Precisely just to get a sense of what's going on now with the mind and the body. How much of your awareness is going into the mind? How much into the body and other sense fields? Okay, now we're going to deepen our embodiment by bringing awareness away from the mind into the posture initially. So we're going to look at some, what I call nuances of posture. So just let the awareness come away from any thinking that's going on right now by bringing it into the sensations of the face, bringing awareness to the sensations of the face. The actual physical, tactile sensations. Then bring your awareness to the jaw. Notice that when I mention a part of the body, you may initially get a kind of visual image of it flashing up, or you're using a kind of mental map of the body to locate that. And be sure that once you've come into the actual sensations, you leave that mental image behind. So there's the actual sensations of the jaw and the joint of the jaw. And then bringing the awareness down to the throat. And let it continue to come down to the upper chest. Sensations of the upper chest. Lower chest. And the diaphragm. Upper abdomen. Lower abdomen. And then down to the sensations of contact with the seat or cushion and floor. So around the buttocks and various parts of the legs or feet, depending on how you're sitting. So those comparatively intense sensations of weight against the seating arrangements. Let your awareness really go into those sensations. Sensations which we understand usually to be sensations of weight. You could say that they're sensations of grounding. They are the grounding of our posture, grounding literally our contact with the ground, with the earth. Can you just experience them as they are without putting any labels on them like weight or pressure? And just experiment and see if you can get a sense that these sensations of contact aren't a kind of border between body and what you're sitting on. They're just these particular sensations. And because they're relatively intense, you might be able to get a sense of energy about them, a kind of vibrational quality to these sensations. Now, can you let your awareness drop down below those sensations? Is there actually anything stopping you from dropping your awareness down below, as it were, into the earth beneath you? Could you even get a sense that the earth beneath you is kind of a space? So we're not kind of trying to project our awareness into the geological earth. We're getting a sense of a kind of energetic earth beneath us. So it's the earth in terms of energy, of chi or prana, that we're just opening our awareness into. You might even get some kind of sense of space rather than solidity. So it might well be that the mind is thinking that's impossible. And it does initially need a bit of suspension of disbelief. It's like we won't really sense it if we're just going, no, that can't happen. Now, continuing with subtle posture, we've got this sense of grounding, with or without a sense of awareness going into the earth. But still using that principle. And again, we're using imagination here, so it's quite important to notice that the imagination can be a support to actual experience, but it's a support which has to be let go of once we have the actual experience. Now, in order to bring more alignment into the posture and more sort of sense of energy in the body, you can have a sense of breathing up from the earth. So as if the breath is coming up from below, through the pelvic floor and right up the core of the body, right up to the top of the head. So on an out breath, you can get a sense of the breath going down into the earth. And as I say, this is primarily imaginative to begin with. Just imagine the breath going down into the earth. And then as it comes up again on the in-breath, have a sense of it coming right up the core of the body. By the core, I mean a sort of corridor towards the back of the torso, but going right up through the neck to the top of the head. So just see with a few breaths whether you can get a sense of the body aligning and becoming more energized by sensing it, the breath coming up from the earth. And again, remember that whatever I'm suggesting, you need to be clear about what works for you or doesn't. So if you try this and find it's not helpful, then just have a sense of the body being aligned, balanced, poised. And then let the breathing become normal. Sensing the grounding of the posture just as it is. With regard to alignment, check that your chin is neither jutting out nor pulling in. So for the alignment of the head or the skull with the spine, you don't want the chin tucked right in or jutting out. So the head is just balancing almost effortlessly. And then let the awareness expand, take in the whole sensate body, the whole sphere of tactile or somatic sensation. And just be the breathing body. So the important point here, be the breathing body. In other words, let your awareness be in the whole body at the moment. And not sensing that your awareness is somehow located probably up in the head, or maybe slightly above or behind the head, as if there's an observer. That sense of an observer is just an idea. We're so used to living in our head that we, in the sense of the mind, that we feel that we are up in the head. Just let go of that idea and be the whole body, the whole breathing body. Now, if you're noticing that there's prapancha, proliferation, hindrances going on, it can be helpful to bring the awareness down to the lower abdomen. So as just everyone tries that just for a little while, the lower abdomen, more or less halfway between the pelvic floor and the navel. And again, being in the lower abdomen, I'll generally refer to this as the hara. Is sometimes called the lower dantian, but I just mean the lower abdomen. The hara means the lower abdomen. And it can be helpful to sense that you're breathing into the hara. There are actually subtle breath sensations in the lower abdomen. So this is really bringing in a variant on the mindfulness of breathing, just having a sense of breathing, the breath going into the hara. And as with any practice of mindfulness of the breathing, whenever you notice that awareness has gone back into the mental proliferation, just immediately come back to the sensations of the hara. And then just let go of making any effort at all. Just sit. And then when you're ready, just open your eyes. Move if you wish to. Okay, so this is a suggested way of basically getting to the point where you can do the mindfulness of breathing or any other practice effectively. And you're probably familiar with the term access concentration. It's usually called upachara samadhi, which is generally thought in terms of access to dhyanas. But I found that actually getting to this point, access means the fact that the 5 hindrances are currently not happening. In other words, they're in abeyance. Yeah, the 5 hindrances not happening, or at least gross hindrances not happening. There might be more subtle ones, but the 5 gross hindrances aren't happening. And I also refer to this as basic presence. Yeah, I call it basic presence because you're basically present. You know, when you're not caught up in these, you know, mental proliferations, or indeed in you know, sloth and torpor, then you're present. And that is like a staging point, access or basic presence, from which you can engage more deeply with mindfulness practice, general mindfulness practice, satipatthana practice. You can engage with the mindfulness of breathing more deeply. You can potentially go into absorptions, dhyanas. You can potentially go from there directly into some kind of reflection or insight practice effectively, or sadhana. You know, so all of these can be done more effectively if we're not mentally proliferating, if we're basically present. So in a way, this is the first objective, is to get to the point where the hindrances are no longer active. Now, this is much easier on a residential retreat, I must admit, but we're all kind of, I assume we're all kind of in some kind of retreat, because we're all stuck in our own homes at the moment. So it would be good to explore what I've been going over a bit further during the day, if you can. And I just want to make a suggestion with regard to working with the hindrances. So we've got all of the usual antidotes that you're probably familiar with. You probably work with them. You'll find a big chart of them in Kamala Shila's book on meditation, for instance. So you're aware of those ways of working. I just want to suggest a way which works with awareness and energy. Yeah, and you can apply this. You can try it. The advantage of it is that you don't, once you get the point, once you get the principle, you don't need to, you don't particularly need to think about it. You can just do this directly. So we've got these 5 hindrances. You know, there's firstly, let's take sloth and torpor. Yeah, so that one can be particularly intractable. You know, sometimes we're just tired, but sometimes there's something else going on. It's like some kind of wanting to avoid our experience, and it's a tendency of the energy to sort of be going down. Yeah, so it's like our whole energy is going downwards, and we're kind of collapsing, either literally or metaphorically, into sleepiness. So here, with sloth and torpor, bring the energy up. Yeah, I mean, that thing that we just did with breathing up from the earth, you can do that and imagine the breath coming right up and even going up above the head. You get a sense of opening up to the space above the head. I mean, this is partly the usual advice with sloth and torpor. Open your eyes. Yeah, but it's important that sense of the energy going upwards, up up to the top of your head. Even at the very top of the head, there's a. If you feel into it, there's a little kind of tickle or vibration going on there for most people. You won't feel it if you're actually touching it, but I'm just pointing out where it is. It's just right in the crown of the head, just about that much inside the skull. Yeah, so you could bring awareness to that if you can locate it, or you can just let awareness go right up into the sky. So bringing all of the energy upwards, so that can help with sloth and torpor. Now, it's the opposite with two of the hindrances are doubt and restlessness and anxiety. Yeah. So restlessness and anxiety tend to be up here along with doubt. So if you notice they're going on, either of those, either doubt, I mean, these are forms of prapancha, obviously, they're forms of mental proliferation. You can bring the awareness down. You can bring it either down to the sensations of contact with the seat or the floor that we were going into in that last practice, or down into the hara. Yeah, so bringing awareness into the hara can help counteract those kinds of prapancha. There are two more kinds of proliferation, which are, of course, there's one kind of going, as it were, out that way. That is desire, sense desire. And there's one that is kind of pulling backwards, which is aversion or ill will, strictly speaking. So you've got these two other directions in which you might seem to be going. Now, my suggestion with either of these, whether it's moving forwards, as it were, into something we desire, or moving back away from something that we are aversive to, bring the awareness into the area just behind the heart. So I was talking about the core, which you can imagine running up, right up, in a way, right up the spine, right to the top of the head. So bringing awareness into that, just behind the heart. That's my suggestion. I think it's important with all of this that if you want to take it up, if you want to play with it, do feel free to do so. But I call it a more energetic or awareness-based way of dealing with the hindrances. It's basically very intuitive because you're just bringing your awareness, so to speak, into the opposite direction. So if you're pulling back or going forwards, you just center it in the core behind the heart. If it's going up, you bring it down, and if it's going down, you bring it up. Yeah, so you can try this in your practice and see what works for you. I mean, different people that I've suggested this to find in their own experience that it's helpful to bring the awareness to slightly different parts than I've suggested. So, just see if it's helpful. If it doesn't help, you've still got all those other antidotes that you can work with. But it's really, I find it really helpful just to get a sense of somatic presence, using this method. So any comments on that or any questions? No questions?
During the meditation, I was moving, my awareness was very much forward in my head and kind of looking down and forward. So instead of in my hara or womb space, so I just concentrated on the energy going up my back to balance. So I was kind of doing what you were saying, but not behind the heart, just my whole spine, because my spine felt really high.
Yeah.
So yeah, so expanding my awareness whilst also holding my womb space and my spine all in at the same time, and that really helped to center me.
Good. Well, that's great. Yeah, you're doing it in your own way. So, I mean, I would say, you know, the whole of that kind of core is available for you to, you know, bring your awareness into and find what effect it has.
Yeah.
You know, it's simply part of our body. So, well, it's a subtle part. It's, you know, you could say it's part of the subtle body, but
yeah,
you know, just feel free to experiment, find what works. Anyone else?
I was going to say that when I'm meditating with other people or sitting, it helps me to get a bodily experience, a stronger experience, very much so in the shrine room, say, rather than when I'm just on my own. And interesting enough, I was feeling that here today, even though we were all in our different spaces. It's quite a tangible feeling for me.
Yeah,
it's more of a I can get more in touch with that energy somehow. So it was really nice to feel, you know, just to experience that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So I mean, we are actually, and again, this might become clearer as we go through these 5 principles during the week. We are actually not separate from each other. You know, we are in contact with each other, and you know, even though it's just for some of us, well, some of you are a potential voice on the screen. I can see a few actual faces, but you know, actually, we are in contact. You know, we are together, and you know, in a way, that's, you know, that's what you're picking up on. You know, just having a sense of we're all here. Anyone else got any comments?
Found it quite powerful, the exercise of drawing the energy up.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I've done it before, but it's fascinating that somehow the imagining, well, I don't know whether it's imagining or experiencing beyond the body. I mean, it feels like experiencing, and then to sort of draw from that place should have such a dramatic effect.
Yeah.
I mean, it felt much like the experience of Preeti, you know, when starting to get absorbed in the breath, for instance. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 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 I find even with one in-breath, you know, in that way, it just lifts up the whole body, just lifts up, and you know, it just naturally aligns. So I mean, it's like you don't need to worry about what's actually happening. What's happening is that by doing that, you know, a sense of alignment is happening, and you know, let go of, you know, of course, literally, we can't breathe up from the earth, yeah, but you know, just by imagining that's happening, it does make a quite significant difference. You know, it's like, well, we're not separate from the earth either. The earth is, you know, it's right here. It's affecting us through gravity. That's why we're experiencing these sensations right now. So, yeah. Okay, well, look, we've only got about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to end it on time, even though we did get off to a slow start this morning. Hopefully, we'll sort that out. But we'll just end with another short meditation. I'll just go through those principles a lot more briefly, and just a couple more orientations which you can maybe work with or experiment with, you know, between now and tomorrow morning. Just from the point of view of what I would call somatic embodiment. So just with your basic posture, just sitting. and sensing how it is right now with mind and body. Awareness comes into the face, and then in your own time, but fairly smoothly and not taking too much time about it, letting it come down to the base of the posture, the grounding, the sensations of grounding. You can also just bring it straight there. Just notice that that is perfectly possible. Sense of the earth beneath. Finding more alignment and energy in the posture by breathing up from the earth. 1 to 3 times, I'd suggest. Checking that the torso, the upper body is poised, it's not leaning over left, right, or forward and back. You can just make a tiny adjustment by subtly moving the body back and forth, left and right, and finding where it's really poised. And being poised also means that it's at ease. You're using the minimal muscular effort to be in the posture. And the same with just checking the chin, not too far out, not too far in. Head quite effortlessly balanced and in alignment. And then just let the awareness sweep down through the body, finding any areas of tension, holding on, contraction, and just discovering to what extent you can let them go. And just be the whole sphere of the soma, of the living, breathing body. Let the awareness be identified with the soma rather than the conceptualizing mind. But if proliferations or just thoughts are happening, there's no need to do anything about them. Just let the awareness be in the soma, in the breathing body. Notice that the thinking mind is not necessary to this full body awareness. Thoughts are not aware. There's something that awareness is aware of, you could say. So this full body awareness is happening without any reference to thought or imagination. And notice the different qualities and sensations of the body, of the soma. There are probably some quite sort of strong or intense sensations, maybe, of course, the contact with the seating arrangements. There's maybe some quite distinct areas of pleasure or unpleasant Vedana. And there's a lot of more subtle body sensations as well. Right down to very, very subtle, kind of tingly, energetic sensations, which can be more or less anywhere in the body or in this sphere of somatic experience. Okay, now let go, just sit, let go of doing any practice whatsoever. And then opening your eyes and moving as you wish. Okay, so that's time up, I'm afraid. I'm happy to, if anyone wants to stick around and answer any, I'm happy to answer any questions or whatever for a few minutes. So, do go if you need to go, but is that okay with you, Badra?
Absolutely fine, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so any observations or comments?
I have a question. And we talk about, can you hear me? It's Richard.
Yeah.
We talk about whole body experience. What I notice is that I'm okay in terms of awareness from about below my neck down, but if my awareness in any way gets anywhere in this top area, then my mind is like this rabid dog. It just grabs it and off you go on some pointless rambling.
Yeah, I'm sure that is the experience of a lot of people, including myself. And that's why, I mean, in terms of what we're going to be doing over the 5 days, today, I brought us into full body awareness, or attempted to. We've attempted that. And the hara. And of course, the hara, I mean, one reason for bringing awareness there is that it's about as far away from here as you can get if you're sitting down.
Yes.
So you can also bring it into the base, into the contact with the floor. But I'd suggest the hara because it's quite an important area of our being, you could say. Well, all of our being are important, but the abdomen is often said to be our second brain. So it's worth exploring what's going on in the abdomen. So we'll be doing more of that, but then we'll be coming up to the heart as well.
And then it gets a bit more dangerous.
Well, yeah. Finally, maybe on the last day, we'll dare to come back into the head as part of experiencing it as part of the soma, rather than just the place where I am, or the brain is, or the thinking's happening. Yeah. So it's a gradual process. So I'd suggest if you need to keep kind of below the neck for now, that's fine. Yeah. But if you just notice that, that initial thing we did with coming into the sensations of the face, it's like you're coming out of the brain into these sensations. And if you can just get a slight sense of that before you bring it downwards,
that
will help. Okay, the face is it's part of the head, but we're not thinking in our face.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other observations or questions?
Tejananda, so the exercise of working with the different axes reminds me of qigong practice, and I experience the different axes very differently. So the more vertical axis is very the body feels very clear.
Yeah.
And on the horizontal axis, I feel like there's that kind of anything from the heart or the hara through the front and the back. I feel it's very clogged up. I want to. The meditation is like flossing, or like so much karmic junk in the body is experienced, and I just wondered if you had any comments on that and recommendations for
Sure. Well, I mean, that's definitely you're describing your actual experience there, which is really important, that you are aware that is my direct experience. So it's like I'm just pointing to certain areas where that you might explore, and what you find there is what you find. So to say you're talking about certain feelings around the heart of being clogged up, or sort of karmic stuff. Yeah, I mean, you can conceive it in that kind of way, and there can be a sense of it opening out and clearing. So through these practices, those kind of areas that feel kind of contracted or clogged, they can open up. It doesn't necessarily happen all at once, but it can open up. Things, emotions that are associated with certain areas of contraction can also open up, and we will be going into this later in the week.
It's not so much that certain parts of the body, the heart, are full of junk, but it's more that they're experienced very differently depending on which direction of the axis I am focusing my awareness on.
Okay.
Curious about why would it feel different? Why would my heart feel different on the vertical axis to the horizontal way?
Well, yeah.
It feels very different to me.
Well, I can only say that's an interesting observation. I haven't actually had somebody bring that point out before, but it's something that anybody could explore in their own experience and find out whether the heart is different, as it were, from a horizontal or a vertical kind of perspective. So I can't say much more than that about it, quite honestly. It's just that, well, that's your experience. I don't know why that should be the case. It just is the case. So it's just something that you can notice. Well, that's my experience.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I'm just wondering if what you were talking about is maybe anything to do exploring the relationship between love for yourself and then love expanding outwards to other people.
Oh, there's definitely a relationship between those.
In terms of the horizontal axes and the vertical axes, I mean.
Yeah.
That could be a relationship there for exploration. But for my experience of that meditation, I just noticed coming into a relationship with some fear around what's been going on recently, actually. So, and a bit of overwhelm that I didn't really notice. Well, I knew that I was a bit overwhelmed, but I definitely could feel it in my throat. And it was really lovely to just integrate part of that and feel the fear release a little bit, and then being like, all right, and then dropping into that more awareness of feeling.
Yeah.
Actually, more awareness of that overwhelm, but in a really lovely way. So there's a lot of integration that needs to happen in just sitting, really, from everything that's been going on the last week or so. It's been quite so that was really lovely. It felt really supportive, and it didn't feel like there was resistance to the kind of felt the energy release quite quickly in my throat,
right,
and then the fear, a little bit of fear, and then just a nice loving awareness, really. So that was really good.
Well, that's a really helpful observation. I think anybody could approach it in that way. It's like, because basically, the fear, the anxiety, that's very much around at the moment. It's in us, it's in our mind, it's in our body. And if you bring awareness into the body aspect, the mind aspect is going to quieten down or even stop. We're just left with feelings in the body, which are just feelings in the body. As soon as they're kind of liberated from the prapancha, then they become something quite different to what they seemed when they were associated with the prapancha. So we will specifically go into this area later on.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure. Anyone else? I see people are disappearing rapidly.
I think that's right, Tejananda. I don't want to sort of cut you off in your flow or anybody else, but I'm just aware that people are starting to leave now. I'm just wondering whether, we have got time. We've got more sessions.
Yeah.
So there'll be more time for Q&A and developing these principles which you've kind of established with us today. So I think I suggest we do close, if that's all right. Close now,
sure.
And we'll carry on tomorrow.
Good.
And, yeah, thank you very much, Tejananda, for this morning. Yes, it was, as we know, a bit of a complex start, but I think where we got to in your teaching was fantastic. So very much appreciated that. Well, this kind of really laying out these principles of somatic embodiment.
Good.
Fantastic.
Okay. Pleasure.
So,
See you tomorrow.
thank you, and well, we'll look forward to seeing you and everyone else tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.